Billionaire sees black worker who looks exactly like his missing daughter. What he discovers next instantly destroys him. You're nothing but a useless factory worker. Get back to your place. Supervisor Tom Brennan's voice cut across the Detroit steel fabrication plant, causing every worker within 50 yards to stop and watch the public humiliation unfolding on the factory floor as she lifted the steel beam with her calloused hands. Victor was watching through the reinforced windows of his executive office. And in that instant, he crumbled because the crescent-shaped birthmark on her shoulder was identical to the one he'd kissed goodnight 23 years ago on his missing daughter, Lily. If you are enjoying the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now let's continue. The 4:30 a.m. alarm shattered the silence in Kate Washington's cramped bedroom on Detroit's east side. She rolled from the narrow twin bed, her joints protesting the movement. 26 years old, and her body already carried the weight of a decade in heavy industry. The mirror reflected tired brown eyes beneath thick, natural curls she kept twisted back with a bright orange headband. The only splash of color she allowed herself for the factory floor. "Morning, Grandmama Paula," she whispered, peeking into the adjacent room where her 78-year-old adoptive grandmother breathed slowly beneath a patchwork quilt. Paula's medications lined the nightstand like tiny soldiers. Diabetes, heart condition, arthritis. Each bottle represented another reason Kate couldn't quit the job that slowly killed her spirit. The steel fabrication plant squatted on the Detroit riverfront like a metal beast, belching steam into the gray November morning. Kate pulled on her safety gear, hard hat, steel-toed boots, the bright yellow safety vest that made her feel like a walking traffic cone. She'd earned her welding certification through night classes, but foreman Tom Brennan treated her like she'd wandered in off the street. Across town, Victor Castellano stood at the wall-to-ceiling windows of his Grosse Pointe mansion, sipping espresso from bone china. The sunrise painted Lake St. Clair in shades of copper and gold, but he saw only numbers. The quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk showed profits up 23%. His construction empire spanned 3 states. At 55, his salt and pepper hair stayed perfectly styled. His charcoal Armani suit pressed to knife-edge precision, but the mansion echoed with emptiness. 23 years since Rebecca fled with their daughter Lily. 23 years of private investigators, false leads, and sleepless nights wondering if his little girl was alive. Victor's phone buzzed. "Boss, the Detroit plant inspection is confirmed for 8 a.m., his assistant Paula announced. "Cancel the union meeting," Victor replied, straightening his burgundy silk tie. "I want to see the operation myself. No advance notice." The Castellano Steelworks employed 847 people across 5 buildings. Victor had purchased the struggling factory 3 years ago, transforming it into the most profitable steel fabrication facility in the Midwest. He knew the numbers by heart: tonnage produced, profit margins, worker productivity rates. What he didn't know was that employee number 3,847 was about to turn his world inside out. Kate clocked in at 7:45 a.m., grabbing her welding helmet from the locker. The factory floor hummed with activity. Conveyor belts carrying steel beams, sparks flying from cutting stations, the rhythmic pounding of hydraulic presses. She moved with practiced efficiency toward her station, but Tom Brennan's voice stopped her cold. "Washington, where do you think you're going?" Tom Brennan stood 6'2", his beer gut straining against a supervisor's shirt. 48 years old with thinning red hair and a perpetual sneer. He'd made Kate's life hell since her first day. His pale blue eyes held the casual cruelty of a man who'd never faced real consequences. "My station, Mr. Brennan," Kate replied, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "The Henderson Project beams need finishing." "Not today, college girl." Tom spat into a paper cup, the brown tobacco juice splashing. "Real welders handle the important contracts. You're on cleanup duty." Kate's jaw tightened. "Mr. Brennan, I have the highest quality ratings in the department. The Henderson contract specifically requested my work." "Listen here. Affirmative action, princess." Tom stepped closer, his voice carrying across the factory floor. Other workers slowed their tasks, sensing confrontation. "I don't care what fancy certificate you bought with food stamps. This is my floor, and I say what gets done. Kate reached for her time card to document the discrimination, and her bright yellow safety vest pulled tight across her shoulders, revealing the crescent-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder blade, perfectly visible through the mesh back panel. Victor Castellano chose that exact moment to enter through the main floor entrance, his Italian leather shoes clicking against concrete. He planned to observe quietly from the mezzanine, but Tom's voice drew his attention to the confrontation below. His eyes found the young woman facing down his supervisor, noting her proud posture, the way she refused to back down despite obvious intimidation. Then she reached up to adjust her hard hat, and Victor's world stopped. The birthmark, crescent-shaped, about 2 inches across, positioned exactly where he remembered, where he traced butterfly kisses every night during bedtime stories, where he told 3-year-old Lily that the moon had marked her as special, chosen for great things. Victor's espresso cup slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the concrete floor. The crash echoed across the factory, causing heads to turn. But Victor couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process anything except that impossible mark on a stranger's shoulder. Tom noticed Victor's arrival, and his voice rose to show off. See, even the owner knows trash when he sees it. But he agrees this ghetto queen belongs in sanitation, not skilled labor. Kate spun around at the word owner, and Victor found himself staring into his own eyes. Not similar, identical. The same deep brown with gold flecks, the same slight upturn at the corners, the same stubborn intelligence that Rebecca used to tease him about. But it was the way she tilted her head, that tiny unconscious gesture Lily had made as a toddler when concentrating, that sent him staggering backward. Victor's mind raced through impossible mathematics. Lily would be 26 now. This woman looked 26. Lily had that exact birthmark. This woman had that exact birthmark. But Lily was gone, lost forever with Rebecca. This had to be coincidence, genetic quirk, trauma-induced hallucination. Kate stared at the man in the expensive suit, noting his sudden pour, the way his hands shook. Rich people made her nervous, but this felt different. He looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. "You all right, sir?" she asked, genuine concern overriding her discomfort. "You look like you need to sit down." The voice, sweet Jesus. Even the voice carried echoes of Rebecca's musical tone, but with strength Lily had inherited from his side of the family. Victor opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. 23 years of grief, hope, and desperate searching crashed together in his chest. Tom Brennan, oblivious to the drama unfolding, pressed his advantage. "Don't worry about him, Washington. Rich folks can't handle seeing how the real world works. Now, grab that mop before I write you up for insubordination." Victor's paralysis shattered. 23 years of wondering what happened to his daughter. 23 years of imagining her safe somewhere, happy, loved, and instead, she was here being degraded by a man who wouldn't last 5 minutes in Victor's world. Tom Brennan. Victor's voice cut across the factory floor like a blade. "My office now." But Victor couldn't take his eyes off the young woman who might be his Lily, grown up and strong and beautiful, working in his factory while he lived in luxury just 20 meters away. The woman who thought he was a stranger, who had no idea she might be looking at her father. At the Castellano Steelworks factory floor, Victor's legs moved without conscious thought, carrying him down the metal stairs from the mezzanine to the factory floor. Each step echoed in his skull like a gunshot. 23 years of searching. 23 years of wondering if Lily was alive, safe, happy, and she was here, working in his factory, being humiliated by his employee while he lived in luxury 20 meters away. Tom Brennan straightened his shoulders when he saw the boss approaching, puffing out his chest like a rooster. The other workers scattered to their stations, sensing the electricity in the air. Only Kate remained frozen in place, her intelligent eyes tracking Victor's approach with growing wariness. "Mr. Castellano," Tom's voice carried across the factory floor with false confidence. "Just handling a discipline issue with one of the problem employees. Washington here thinks she knows better than supervisors with 20 years experience." Victor stopped 6 feet away from Kate, close enough to study every detail of her face. The same stubborn chin Rebecca used to kiss. The same way of pressing her lips together when thinking. Even the same habit of touching her left ear when nervous that Lily had displayed as a toddler. Problem employee, Victor repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. His hands trembled as he fought to maintain composure. Explain the problem, Brennan. Tom's confidence grew, mistaking Victor's stillness for approval. She's been causing trouble since day one, thinks her college degree makes her special, questioning safety protocols, acting like she knows better than men who've been doing this job since before she was born. Kate's jaw tightened. Mr. Brennan, I was suggesting modifications to prevent metal fatigue in the Henderson project beams. The current welding specifications could compromise structural integrity. See what I mean? Tom laughed, a harsh sound that grated against Victor's nerves. College princess thinks she's an engineer now. These people always think they deserve more than they've earned. The words these people hit Victor like a physical blow. His daughter. Someone was calling his daughter these people while she stood there, taking it with the same dignified strength Rebecca had shown when facing his business associates' wives at corporate dinners. Victor stepped closer to Kate, ostensibly to examine her workstation, but really to get another look at that birthmark. The crescent shape was perfect, exactly as he remembered. A wave of memories crashed over him. 3-year-old Lily in pink pajamas, giggling as he traced the mark with his finger, calling it her moon kiss, because it looked like a crescent moon. What's your full name? Victor asked Kate directly, ignoring Tom completely. Kate Marie Washington, sir, she replied, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. I've been employed here for 14 months. Washington, not Castellano. But Rebecca had remarried after leaving him, taken her new husband's name. Lily would have taken that name too, grown up as someone else entirely. Victor's chest constricted as he realized his daughter had lived an entire life he knew nothing about. Your qualifications, Victor continued, noting how she stood straighter when discussing her credentials. Associate's degree in metallurgical engineering from Wayne State, certified welder, OSHA safety certification. And I'm currently pursuing my bachelor's degree through night classes. Pride flickered in her eyes despite the circumstances. Victor's private investigator, Mark Webb, chose that exact moment to call. Victor's phone rang, and the caller ID displayed Webb Investigations. The same firm that had been searching for Lily for over 2 decades was calling while she stood 3 feet away from him. Victor declined the call without answering, but the irony twisted in his gut like a knife. How much money had he spent? How many false leads had Mark chased across the country? And Lily had been here the whole time, working in one of his own facilities. Tom misinterpreted Victor's silence as disapproval of Kate. See, boss, I told you she was trouble. These affirmative action hires always cause problems. They don't understand their place in the natural order. The phrase natural order shattered Victor's remaining composure. He thought of Lily growing up believing her father had abandoned her. He thought of the empty nursery he'd preserved for 23 years, hoping someday she'd come home. He thought of every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone he'd missed while she worked factory jobs to survive. Natural order, Victor repeated, his voice carrying a deadly calm that made several nearby workers stop what they were doing. Explain that phrase, Brennan. Tom, emboldened by what he perceived as Victor's agreement, continued his toxic monologue. You know how it is, Mr. Castellano. Some people are meant to lead, others are meant to follow. These inner city types, they're good for manual labor, but they don't have the breeding for skilled work. It's just genetics. Got it. If you need any edits or further help with this text, feel free to let me know. Effective immediately, Victor announced, his voice carrying across the silent factory floor. Escort him from the premises. Make sure he understands that any attempt to return will result in a trespassing charge. Victor released Tom, who collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The security guards hauled him upright with professional efficiency. This isn't legal, Tom protested, his voice cracking. You can't fire me without cause. I'll sue for wrongful termination, sexual harassment, racial discrimination, creating a hostile work environment, and threatening an employee. Victor rattled off without emotion. I'm sure HR has documented plenty of cause. And Brennan, he waited until Tom met his eyes. If I ever hear you found employment at another facility in the city, I'll personally ensure your reputation follows you. My reach extends far beyond this factory. The guards dragged Tom toward the exit, his protests echoing across the factory floor. Victor watched them go, his chest heaving as adrenaline coursed through his system. Then he turned to face the woman who might be his daughter. Kate was staring at him with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. "You called me your daughter," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the machinery. "What did you mean?" Victor's mouth went dry. He'd planned to approach this delicately, to investigate quietly, to confirm his suspicions before revealing anything. But rage had stripped away his careful control, and now Lily was looking at him with questions he wasn't prepared to answer. "I?" Victor started, then stopped. "How do you tell someone they might be your missing child? How do you explain 23 years of searching? How do you bridge a gulf that wide without breaking both your hearts in the process?" The other workers were pretending to focus on their tasks, but Victor could feel their attention like heat from a furnace. This conversation couldn't happen here in front of dozens of witnesses who would turn it into factory gossip within hours. "We need to talk," Victor said finally. "Privately, there are things I need to explain that you deserve to hear." Kate took a step back, wariness replacing confusion. "I don't understand what's happening here. You fired a supervisor for harassing me, then called me your daughter. I think there's been some kind of mistake." "There's been a mistake," Victor agreed, his voice heavy with 23 years of regret, "but not the kind you're thinking." He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed his assistant. "Paula, clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Cancel the board meeting, reschedule the Henderson contract signing, and send the Bentley to the factory. I need immediate transportation for 2 people." "Victor," Kate said, and hearing her say his name sent electricity through his nervous system. "I can't just leave work. I need this job. My grandmother depends on my paycheck." "Your grandmother," Victor repeated, remembering the elderly woman who'd raised Rebecca after her parents died. Paula Washington had been like a mother to his ex-wife. If Ka was Lily, then Paula would be the woman who'd helped raise his daughter. "Yes, Grandmama Paula. She's sick, and I'm all she has." Kate's voice softened when she mentioned the woman who'd raised her. "I can't afford to lose this position just because you want to have some mysterious conversation." Victor's heart broke a little more. His daughter was worried about losing a job that barely paid living wages while he owned the company. She was caring for an elderly woman on a factory worker's salary while he lived in a mansion with more rooms than he could use. "You won't lose your position," Victor said firmly. "And your grandmother's medical bills will be taken care of regardless of what we discover in our conversation." Kate's eyes flashed with anger. "I don't want charity. I work for what I have. I don't need some rich man swooping in to save me because he feels guilty about firing my supervisor." The fire in her eyes was pure Castellano. Victor had seen that same stubborn pride in his own mirror countless times. It was the look Rebecca used to get when he tried to solve her problems with money instead of understanding. "It's not charity," Victor said quietly. "It's something I owe you, something I should have been providing all along." The Bentley arrived with perfect timing, gliding through the factory gates like a black shark. Paula had called ahead to arrange everything, including a temporary supervisor to oversee Kate's department. Victor's employees were accustomed to his sudden demands and dramatic gestures, but none of them had ever seen him look at another person the way he was looking at the young woman in the bright yellow safety vest. "One conversation," Victor said, extending his hand toward the car. "Give me 1 hour to explain everything. If you don't believe me, if you think I'm crazy or lying, then you walk away and pretend this never happened. But if there's even a chance that what I suspect is true, don't you owe it to yourself to find out?" Kate looked at the luxury car, then at her coworkers pretending not to stare, then finally at Victor's face. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. "1 hour," she agreed, "but I'm keeping my safety vest on. This doesn't make us friends." Victor smiled for the first time in 23 years. Really smiled, because his daughter had inherited his negotiating instincts along with his eyes and Rebecca's musical voice. As they walked toward the Bentley together, Victor's phone buzzed with another call from Mark Webb. This time, he answered. "Mark, I need you to drop everything you're doing and meet me at my office in 2 hours. Bring every file you have on the Lily Castellano case. All of it. Did you get another lead? Mark asked, hope evident in his voice after years of false starts. Victor looked at the young woman settling into his car's leather seats. Her bright yellow safety vest, a splash of color against the black interior. I think I found her. The leather seats of the Bentley felt foreign against Kate's workflow. She kept her bright yellow safety vest zipped tight, a barrier between herself and the luxury surrounding her. Victor sat across from her in the spacious rear compartment, his hands folded in his lap to hide their trembling. The privacy partition separated them from the driver, creating an intimate bubble of tension. Your grandmother, Victor began, his voice carefully controlled. Paula Washington, how long have you lived with her? Kate's defensive walls snapped into place. Rich men didn't ask personal questions without ulterior motives. Since I was 16. Why does that matter to you? Paula raised your mother too, didn't she? Victor pressed, watching Kate's face for any flicker of recognition. Your adoptive mother, I mean. The distinction hit Kate like a physical blow. She'd never told him she was adopted. That information wasn't in any employee file, wasn't something she shared with coworkers or supervisors. Her hands clenched in her lap as she studied Victor's face with new wariness. How do you know I'm adopted? She asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Victor realized his mistake immediately. He'd revealed too much again, let his desperation override his caution. The truth was, he'd spent the sleepless hours after seeing her yesterday having Paula pull every available record, but he couldn't explain that without sounding like a stalker. Lucky guess, Victor said weakly, then shook his head. No, that's not honest. I had my assistant research your background after what happened yesterday. I wanted to understand why Tom was targeting you specifically. Kate's laugh held no humor. You researched me like I'm some kind of business acquisition. Got it. Here's the text you wanted. What gave you the right to invade my privacy? Nothing, Victor admitted, the word heavy with regret. I had no right, but Kate, what I discovered, it changes everything. The Bentley pulled into the parking garage beneath Castellano Tower, a gleaming 40-story monument to Victor's success. Kate stared up through the car's sunroof at the concrete ceiling, feeling the weight of all those floors pressing down on her. This was Victor's world, a place where people like her cleaned offices after hours, but never belonged during business hours. I don't want to go up there, Kate said quietly. This feels wrong. You're my boss. I'm an employee. There are rules about this kind of thing. Victor's chest tightened at her words. She was protecting herself with corporate protocol because she had no reason to trust him. Why would she? He was a stranger with too much money and too many secrets, asking invasive questions about her family. You're right, Victor said, surprising her. This is highly irregular. But Kate, I'm not approaching you as your employer. I'm approaching you as someone who's been searching for answers for 23 years. The elevator ride to the 38th floor passed in uncomfortable silence. Kate kept her arms crossed, her posture screaming resistance to whatever Victor planned to reveal. Victor studied her profile in the elevator's mirrored walls, memorizing the curve of her jaw, the way she held her head when thinking. Everything about her radiated familiar stubbornness. Paula stood when they entered Victor's outer office, her professional smile faltering when she saw Kate's workflow. After 20 years as Victor's assistant, she'd never seen him bring a factory employee to the executive floor. Mr. Webb is waiting in your office, Paula reported. He brought the files you requested. Mark Webb rose from the leather chair facing Victor's desk when they entered, 62 years old with silver hair and watchful gray eyes. Let me know if you'd like to dive into more of this or expand on any part. Mark had been searching for Lily Castellano longer than most people stayed married. His expression shifted from professional curiosity to shock when he saw Kate. Victor, Mark said slowly, his gaze fixed on Kate's face. Where did you find her? Find who? Kate demanded, looking from Mark to Victor with growing alarm. What is this about? I want straight answers, not cryptic comments and meaningful looks. Victor moved to his desk safe, his fingers working the combination with practiced efficiency. Inside, wrapped in acid-free tissue, lay the remnants of his daughter's short life. Baby photos, hospital bracelets, a lock of dark hair cut on her first birthday. And at the bottom, the mate to the crescent-shaped birthmark he'd memorized yesterday. 23 years ago, Victor began, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. My 3-year-old daughter disappeared with her mother. They left no forwarding address, no trace, no way for me to find them. He placed Lily's baby photo on the desk. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same eyes, same stubborn chin, same way of tilting her head when curious. Kate stared at the image, her face draining of color. That doesn't prove anything, Kate whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Lots of children look alike. Mark opened his thick file folder, spreading decades of documentation across Victor's desk. Missing person reports, private investigator summaries, leads that went nowhere, hope that died slow deaths. The paper trail of a father's obsession. Lily Maria Castellano, Mark read from the original missing person report. Born September 15, 1998. 3 years old at time of disappearance. Distinguishing marks include a crescent-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder blade. Kate's hand moved involuntarily to her shoulder, touching the mark through her safety vest. The gesture didn't go unnoticed by either man. When's your birthday? Victor asked, though he already knew the answer from her employment records. September 15th, Kate replied automatically, then caught herself. But that's just coincidence. Millions of people share birthdays. Victor pulled out the hospital bracelet from Lily's birth. The plastic yellowed with age, but the information still legible. Detroit General Hospital, September 15th, 1998, 3:42 a.m. 7 pound 3 ounce. Kate's breathing became shallow. She'd seen her own birth certificate before when applying for her driver's license and passport. The details matched perfectly, but birth certificates could be forged, couldn't they? Adoptive parents sometimes created new documents to protect children from difficult pasts. This is crazy, Kate said, backing toward the door. You're telling me that I'm your missing daughter based on a birthmark and a birthday? Do you realize how insane that sounds? There's more, Victor said gently, opening another folder. Your adoptive mother's maiden name was Rebecca Martinez. She worked as a translator for immigration services before she married me. The world tilted sideways. Kate gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. Her adoptive mother had mentioned growing up bilingual, working with immigrant families before her marriage to Kate's adoptive father. But she'd never mentioned a first marriage, never spoken of a life before the man who'd raised Kate. Rebecca died 2 years ago, Kate said weakly. Cancer. She never mentioned you, never said anything about a first husband or a daughter she left behind. Mark consulted his notes. Rebecca Martinez married Victor Castellano in June 1995, divorced in January 2002, citing irreconcilable differences. She disappeared with the couple's daughter immediately after the divorce was finalized. Disappeared? Kate repeated, her voice gaining strength. You make it sound like she kidnapped me. Maybe she left because you were a terrible husband and father. The words hit Victor like physical blows, but he couldn't deny their possible truth. He'd worked 18-hour days building his empire, missing bedtime stories and ballet recitals, and the 1,000 small moments that build a family. Rebecca had begged him to slow down, to remember that Lily needed her father present, not just providing. Maybe she did, Victor admitted. Maybe I drove her away with my neglect. Maybe she was protecting you from a man who valued business over family. His honesty surprised Kate into silence. She'd expected denial, justification, the kind of self-serving narrative powerful men usually constructed. Instead, Victor was accepting responsibility for his failures with devastating clarity. But that doesn't change the fact that you're my daughter, Victor continued. And it doesn't change the fact that I've spent 23 years wondering if you were alive, safe, happy. Every birthday, every Christmas, every major milestone, I wondered where you were and whether you remembered that you had a father who loved you. Kate's composure cracked. If you loved me so much, why didn't you find me? You have money, resources, connections. You could have hired armies of investigators. I did, Victor said simply, gesturing to Mark. Mark has been working this case for over 2 decades. We followed leads across 12 states, investigated hundreds of false sightings, spent millions on private investigators and reward offers. Mark nodded grimly. Your mother was very thorough about disappearing. New social security number, new identity documents, new life history. She didn't want to be found because you were dangerous to us. Kate shot back, her anger flaring. Rich men don't just lose their families by accident. What did you do? What were you involved in that made my mother run away and hide? The question hung in the air like smoke. Victor exchanged a look with Mark, and Kate caught the silent communication between them. There were secrets here, dangerous ones, the kind that explained why a woman might steal her daughter and disappear rather than fight for custody through the courts. I built my business aggressively, Victor said carefully. I made enemies, people who might have used my family as leverage against me. What kind of enemies? Kate pressed, sensing weakness in his evasion. Victor's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. The message was from a blocked number, but the words were crystal clear. We know you found her. Some secrets should stay buried. We need to run a DNA test, Victor said abruptly, sliding his phone into his desk drawer, to confirm what we both know is true. I'm not giving you my DNA, Kate said firmly. I don't know you. I don't trust you. And I'm starting to think my mother had good reasons for keeping me away from you. Mark cleared his throat diplomatically. Miss Washington, I understand your reluctance. But consider this. If Victor is wrong, the DNA test proves it definitively. You walk away with no further contact. If he's right, Mark paused, studying her face. If he's right, then you deserve to know the truth about your identity. Kate looked around Victor's office, taking in the expensive artwork, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Detroit, the casual display of wealth that represented more money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes. This could all be hers if Victor was telling the truth. Financial security for herself and Grandmama Paula, an end to worrying about rent and medical bills, and whether the car would start in the morning. But it would also mean accepting that her entire life had been built on lies. That the woman who'd raised her with such love and sacrifice had stolen her from her biological father. That her real identity had been erased to protect her from whatever darkness surrounded Victor's business empire. If I take this test, Kate said slowly, and if it proves what you think it proves, then what? I'm supposed to suddenly become your daughter? Pretend the last 23 years didn't happen? Play happy family while you explain why my mother was so terrified of you that she'd rather live in poverty than let you find us? Victor's face crumpled with genuine anguish. I don't expect anything from you, Kate. If you are Lily, if you are my daughter, then you owe me nothing. I owe you everything. 23 years of birthdays I missed. Graduations I wasn't there for. Nights when you might have needed your father and I wasn't available because I didn't know you existed. The sincerity in his voice shook Kate's resistance. She'd prepared herself for manipulation, for emotional blackmail, for the kind of power plays rich men use to get what they wanted. She hadn't prepared for genuine remorse and unconditional acceptance of responsibility. One test, she said finally. But I want it done at an independent lab, not somewhere you have influence. And I want the results sent to both of us simultaneously. No private conversations with lab technicians. No opportunities for you to manipulate the outcome. Agreed, Victor said immediately. Mark arranged for testing at Wayne State University's genetics lab. Full chain of custody documentation. As Mark made the arrangements, Victor and Kate sat in uncomfortable silence. The weight of possibility hung between them like a live wire. If the test was positive, everything changed. If it was negative, Kate would return to her factory job, and Victor would continue his endless search for a daughter who might be dead. There's something else, Victor said quietly. Something I need to prepare you for if the test confirms our relationship. Kate's stomach clenched with new dread. What? The people who made your mother run away? Victor said, his voice heavy with old guilt. They are still out there. And if they discover that you're alive, that I've found you, he met her eyes with painful honesty. They might see you as a way to hurt me. The text message on Victor's phone buzzed again. This time, the words made his blood freeze. The girl doesn't know how dangerous her father really is. Maybe it's time she learned the truth about the Castellano family business. The genetics laboratory at Wayne State University occupied the third floor of the biosciences building, its sterile white corridors humming with the quiet efficiency of scientific precision. Dr. Anna Foster, the lab's director, met them in the reception area, her graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and her white coat bearing the inevitable coffee stains of a busy researcher. "Mr. Castellano," Dr. Foster said, extending her hand with professional warmth. Mark Webb explained the urgency of this paternity test. "We can have preliminary results within 6 hours using our rapid processing protocol." Kate shifted uncomfortably in her bright yellow safety vest, though which looked increasingly absurd in the academic setting. She'd refused Victor's offer to buy her different clothes, clinging to her work uniform like armor against the surreal situation unfolding around her. 6 hours, Kate repeated, the reality hitting her fully for the first time. In 6 hours, her entire identity might change forever. She'd either walk out of here as Kate Washington, factory worker and granddaughter of Paula, or as Lily Castellano, heir to a billion-dollar empire, and daughter of a man she'd met yesterday. "The collection process is simple," Dr. Foster continued, leading them down a corridor lined with laboratory equipment. Cheek swabs from both parties, witnessed collection to maintain chain of custody, and then we wait for the DNA analysis. They entered a small room furnished with 2 chairs and a steel table. Dr. Foster opened a sealed kit containing cotton swabs and collection tubes, her movements practiced and efficient. Victor sat in one chair, Kate in the other, the distance between them feeling like an ocean. "Before we proceed," Dr. Foster said, pulling on latex gloves, "I need to confirm that both parties consent to this testing voluntarily, without coercion or duress." Victor nodded immediately. Kate hesitated, her hand moving unconsciously to touch the birthmark on her shoulder through her vest. The gesture had become habitual since yesterday, a nervous tic triggered by the impossible possibility that her entire life had been constructed on lies. "Miss Washington," Dr. Foster prompted gently. "I consent," Kate said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "But I want the results sent to both of us simultaneously. No private communications with either party." "Standard protocol," Dr. Foster assured her. Beginning with Victor's sample. "Open your mouth, please. This won't take more than 30 seconds." Victor submitted to the procedure with passive cooperation, his eyes fixed on Kate throughout the process. She watched him with clinical detachment, studying his features for similarities she might have missed. His nose was different from hers, straighter and more defined. But his eyes held the same stubborn intelligence that stared back at her from mirrors. And when he concentrated, he pressed his lips together in exactly the same way she did when thinking through difficult problems. "Miss Washington, you're next," Dr. Foster said, moving to Kate's chair with a fresh swab. The cotton felt rough against the inside of Kate's cheek, an invasive intimacy that made her want to flee. In 30 seconds, her genetic code would be extracted, analyzed, compared to the man sitting across from her. Science would provide definitive answers to questions she'd never thought to ask. "Results will be available at 5:15 p.m., Dr. Foster said, sealing both samples in labeled containers. "You can return then, or I can email the reports to the addresses you've provided." "We'll wait," Victor said, surprising Kate. "If that's acceptable to you," he added, looking at her directly. Kate checked her phone. 6 hours to kill in the company of a man who might be her father. Surrounded by the weight of 23 years of separation and secrets, she planned to go home to Grandmama Paula to process this madness in the familiar comfort of their small apartment. But Paula would ask questions Kate wasn't ready to answer, and the elderly woman's health was fragile enough without adding the shock of potential family revelations. "Fine," Kate agreed, "but I'm not spending 6 hours in your office or your mansion. If we're doing this, we're doing it somewhere neutral." Victor nodded, understanding. "There's a coffee shop near campus, quiet, public, no corporate atmosphere." The grind occupied a converted Victorian house 2 blocks from the university. Its mismatched furniture and book-lined walls created the kind of comfortable academic atmosphere that attracted students and professors alike. Victor looked oddly out of place in his expensive suit, but he'd insisted they come here rather than somewhere more suited to his usual social circle. They claimed a corner table near tall windows that overlooked the Detroit River. Kate ordered black coffee and a day-old muffin, the kind of practical meal that fit her factory worker's budget. Victor ordered the same, though she suspected he usually drank imported espresso and ate catered lunches. "Tell me about Rebecca," Victor said after the server left. What was she like as a mother? The question caught Kate off guard. She'd expected him to talk about himself, to justify his version of events, or defend his character. Instead, he wanted to hear about the woman who'd taken his daughter away. She was fierce, Kate said slowly, stirring sugar into her coffee. Protective. She worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat after my adoptive father died. Never complained about being tired or stressed. She taught me that dignity wasn't about having money. It was about how you treated people. Victor's expression grew pained. She always had strong principles. It's one of the things I fell in love with when we met. How did you meet? Kate asked, surprising herself with genuine curiosity. I was translating for a family trying to get construction permits for a small restaurant, Victor replied, his voice softening with memory. I was the contractor they'd hired, but there was confusion about the building codes. Rebecca spent 4 hours helping us sort through the regulations, never charged a fee, just wanted to help this family achieve their dream. Kate could picture that version of her adoptive mother, the woman who'd always stop to help elderly neighbors with their groceries, or spend extra time tutoring struggling students in her ESL classes. But it was hard to reconcile that generous spirit with someone who'd stolen a child and disappeared. What went wrong? Kate asked. Between you and her. What made her leave? Victor stared out the window at the river, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. I was building an empire, and I thought providing for you both was the same as being present for you both. I worked 18-hour days, missed your bedtime stories, forgot family dinners. Rebecca begged me to slow down, to remember that you needed a father, not just a paycheck. But that doesn't explain why she ran away instead of fighting for custody. Victor's jaw tightened. My business attracted dangerous attention. People who might have used my family as leverage. Rebecca was terrified that staying meant putting you in danger. What kind of business requires that level of security? Kate pressed. Construction companies don't usually have enemies who threaten children. Before Victor could answer, his phone buzzed with another text message. His face went pale as he read it, and he quickly turned the screen away from Kate's view. But she'd caught enough to see it was another message from a blocked number. Who keeps texting you? Kate demanded. And don't tell me it's business calls. Sure, here's the text as requested. You look terrified every time your phone buzzes. Victor hesitated, clearly debating how much truth to reveal. There are people who don't want me to find you, people who benefited from my family being broken. That's not an answer, Kate said firmly. If I'm really your daughter, if I'm walking into your world, then I have a right to know what dangers come with it. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mark Webb, who slid into an empty chair at their table with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to inserting himself into delicate situations. His silver hair was windblown, and his usually immaculate appearance showed signs of haste. We have a problem, Mark announced without preamble. Someone's been asking questions about today's DNA test, questions that suggest they knew about it before we made the arrangements. Victor's hand clenched around his coffee cup. How is that possible? We only decided this morning. Your office phones might be monitored, Mark replied grimly, or someone has access to your assistant's calendar. Either way, our movements aren't as private as we thought. Kate felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November weather. Monitored by whom? Why would anyone care about a paternity test? Mark and Victor exchanged a look heavy with unspoken history. Kate was tired of being excluded from conversations about her own life, tired of cryptic warnings and half-explanations. Enough, she said, her voice carrying the authority she'd learned managing difficult situations at the factory. If you want me to believe I'm part of this family, then start treating me like an adult who can handle the truth. What exactly is the Castellano family business? And why does it come with bodyguards and death threats? Victor looked around the coffee shop, noting how many people were close enough to overhear their conversation. The academic atmosphere that had seemed comfortable now felt exposed, vulnerable. Not here, Victor said quietly. Too many ears. Then where? Kate demanded. Your office is apparently bugged. Public places are too exposed. Where exactly can we have an honest conversation? Mark pulled out a set of car keys. My office has been swept for surveillance devices twice this week. It's the most secure location we have available. Kate found herself in another luxury vehicle. This time, Mark's black SUV with tinted windows and more electronic equipment than most people's homes. The private investigator's office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in Detroit's Corktown district. Its exposed brick walls and steel beams created an industrial atmosphere, softened by expensive leather furniture and state-of-the-art security systems. Victor's construction business is legitimate, Mark began once they were settled in his conference room. But the money that initially funded it came from sources that attracted federal attention. What kind of sources? Kate asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. Import-export operations that weren't entirely focused on legal goods, Victor said, his voice heavy with old guilt. When I was young and ambitious, I took money from investors who didn't ask questions about where their profits came from. Kate's stomach dropped. You're talking about organized crime. I'm talking about poor judgment and desperate ambition, Victor corrected. I needed capital to compete with established contractors, and I accepted funding from people I should have avoided. By the time I realized the full scope of their operations, I was already in too deep to walk away cleanly. So my mother ran away because you were involved with criminals? Kate said, pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. She was protecting me from people who might hurt a mob contractor's family. Victor nodded miserably. I tried to get out, to go legitimate, but they saw my family as insurance against my cooperation. Rebecca begged me to choose between the business and you both. I thought I could have everything, could protect you while maintaining the partnerships that built my empire. And now they know you found me, Kate said, understanding the morning's threatening text messages. Which means what exactly? That they'll try to hurt me to control you. Mark consulted his phone, his expression growing more serious. It means we need to assume your safety is compromised until we can determine how much they know and what they're planning to do about it. The weight of this new reality settled on Kate like a heavy blanket. She'd gone from factory worker to potential target to criminal target in the span of 24 hours. The simple life she'd built with Grandmama Paula, the quiet satisfaction of honest work and modest dreams, felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. I didn't ask for any of this, Kate said quietly. Yesterday, I was worried about making rent and paying for Grandmama Paula's medications. Now you're telling me I need bodyguards because my biological father made deals with the mob 25 years ago. You don't have to stay, Victor said, his voice breaking slightly. If the DNA test confirms what we suspect, if you are Lily, you can still walk away. I'll make sure Paula's medical expenses are covered, that you're both protected from any fallout. But you don't owe me anything, just because we share genetic material. Kate looked at this man, who might be her father, studying the genuine anguish in his features. He was offering her wealth and family and danger in equal measure, asking nothing in return except the chance to know her. It was more complicated than any decision she'd ever faced. The test results will be ready in 2 hours, she said. Finally, we wait for those, and then we decide what comes next. But Victor, she met his eyes directly. If I am your daughter, then I need to know everything. No more secrets. No more protecting me from uncomfortable truths. If I'm going to be part of this family, then I'm going to be part of it completely. Victor nodded, hope and terror warring in his expression. In 2 hours, he would either lose his daughter forever or gain a chance to build the relationship he dreamed about for 23 years. Either way, nothing would ever be the same. Mark opened a locked filing cabinet and withdrew a thick folder marked Castellano Financial Networks 1995 to 2002. The manila envelope was worn with age and handling, its contents representing years of investigation into Victor's business partnerships during his early empire-building phase. Before we go further, Mark said, spreading documents across his conference table, you need to understand that everything I'm about to show you was obtained legally through public records, court filings, and federal investigations that were eventually dropped. Kate leaned forward, studying bank records and corporate filings that painted a picture of Victor's rise from struggling contractor to construction magnate. The numbers were staggering. In 1995, Victor's company had assets of $50,000. By 2001, those assets had grown to $15 million, a rate of expansion that defied normal business growth patterns. The Torino family controlled construction contracts in 3 states, Victor began, his voice steady but heavy with old shame. They had judges, city planners, and union leaders in their pockets. If you wanted to build anything bigger than a garden shed, you needed their approval. Mark pointed to a series of bank transfers highlighted in yellow. Victor's initial loans came from Torino Financial, a legitimate front company. The interest rates were reasonable, the term standard, but the real cost came in favors. What kind of favors? Kate asked, though she suspected the answer would make her sick. Victor met her eyes directly, refusing to hide behind euphemisms. I laundered money through construction materials purchases, inflated invoices for concrete and steel that allowed them to move cash from illegal operations into legitimate businesses. In return, I got exclusive contracts for major projects. Kate felt her stomach clench. You were a criminal. I was a partner in criminal enterprises, Victor corrected with brutal honesty. I told myself I was just taking advantage of business opportunities, but I knew where the money came from. Drug trafficking, illegal gambling, protection rackets. I knew, and I didn't care, because it was making me rich. Mark opened another section of the file, revealing FBI surveillance photos from the late 1990s. Victor looked younger in the images, his face harder, more ruthless. He was shaking hands with men whose faces Kate recognized from news reports about organized crime trials. The FBI had been building a case against the Torino operation for 3 years, Mark explained. Victor wasn't their primary target, but he was definitely in their crosshairs as a key financial partner. What changed? Kate asked. You obviously didn't go to prison. Victor's expression grew even more pained. You changed everything. When you were born, when I held you for the first time, I realized I was building an empire on a foundation that could collapse and bury my family in the wreckage. Mark turned to a section marked Attempted Withdrawal, 2001. The documents showed Victor's efforts to distance himself from Torino operations, to transition his business to legitimate funding sources, to break the partnerships that had made him wealthy. The Torinos didn't accept resignation letters, Victor continued. They made it clear that my family's safety depended on my continued cooperation. That's when Rebecca started finding strange cars parked outside our house, when she noticed men following her to the grocery store. Kate studied a police report dated January 15, 2002. Rebecca had called 911 to report suspicious activity around their Grosse Pointe home. The responding officers found nothing, but their report noted Mrs. Castellano's genuine fear and the legitimate security concerns surrounding her husband's business associations. She begged me to choose, Victor said, his voice breaking slightly. The business or my family? But you didn't choose, Kate said, understanding flooding her voice. You tried to have both. Victor nodded miserably. I was arrogant enough to think I could protect you both while maintaining the relationships that built my fortune. I hired bodyguards, installed security systems, convinced myself that I could keep you safe through money and preparation. Mark opened a final folder, this one containing private investigator reports from the months following Rebecca and Lily's disappearance. The documentation was heartbreaking in its thoroughness. Victor had spent millions searching for them, hiring entire teams of investigators, following leads across the country. The divorce papers were filed February 1, 2002, Mark said, but Rebecca and Lily disappeared 2 weeks before the final decree. She left this. He handed Kate a letter written in careful script on hotel stationery. The paper was yellowed with age, but the words were still legible. Victor, Kate read aloud, I can't let our daughter grow up in the shadow of your choices. Lily deserves a life free from the fear that has consumed our marriage. I'm taking her somewhere safe, somewhere your business partners can't find us. Don't look for us. If you truly love her, let us disappear. I know this will destroy you, and I'm sorry for that pain, but I would rather break your heart than attend our daughter's funeral. The money you've earned through those partnerships isn't worth Lily's life. Choose your empire over your family if you must, but I won't let you choose it over our child's safety. The letter was signed simply, Rebecca, with a postscript that made Kate's breath catch. I will always love the man you were before the money changed you. I pray someday you can find him again. Victor's hands shook as he took the letter back from Kate. I've read that letter 10,000 times over the years. Every word is burned into my memory. She was protecting me, Kate whispered, the full weight of understanding settling on her shoulders. All those years I thought I was abandoned. She was actually sacrificing everything to keep me safe. Mark consulted his watch. The DNA results should be available in 90 minutes. But Victor, there's something else you need to know about Rebecca's disappearance. Victor looked up sharply. What do you mean? I found this 3 days ago, Mark said, producing a death certificate from Cook County, Illinois. Rebecca Martinez Castellano died 18 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, but her obituary listed survivors differently than you'd expect. Kate's heart hammered as she read the document. Her adoptive mother's real name, her real birth date, everything she'd known about her family's history rearranged in black and white. She never remarried. Mark continued gently. She kept your last name legally even after disappearing. And Kate, she listed you in the obituary as her daughter Lily Castellano, not Kate Washington. The room spun around Kate as the implications hit her. She never stopped being my mother. Even after everything, even after running away to protect me, she never gave up my real identity. Victor wiped tears from his eyes with the back of his hand. She died thinking I hated her for taking you. Died believing I chose money over family. There's more, Mark said quietly. Rebecca's personal effects were donated to charity, but I managed to track down some items that were kept by the funeral home director. Letters she wrote but never sent. A journal she kept about Lily's childhood. He produced a small leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with Rebecca's careful handwriting. Victor opened it randomly and began reading aloud. Lily turned 5 today. She asked why she doesn't have a daddy like the other children. I told her that her daddy loved her very much but lived far away. I couldn't tell her the truth, that her daddy chose business over family because she still deserves to believe in love. Victor's voice broke completely. He closed the journal and pushed it away, unable to continue reading Rebecca's private thoughts about their separation. She documented everything, Mark said softly. Every birthday, every school play, every milestone. She kept a record of Lily's life because she hoped someday she could share it with you. Kate reached for the journal with trembling hands. The pages contained her entire childhood from her mother's perspective. Report cards, photos, even pressed flowers from elementary school art projects. Rebecca had preserved every detail of Lily's life while keeping her hidden from the father who searched for her desperately. Look at this, Kate said, finding an entry from her 10th birthday. She wrote, Lily asked again about her father today. She's old enough now to understand that families can be complicated. I told her that sometimes parents make choices that hurt the people they love most. She said she hopes her daddy is happy, even if he can't be with us. My heart broke a little more. Victor stood abruptly, walking to Mark's window to stare out at the Detroit skyline. His empire stretched across the horizon, 40-story monuments to his ambition and success. But all of it felt hollow now, knowing what it had cost him. She raised our daughter to forgive me, Victor said, his voice barely audible. Even after I chose money over family, Rebecca taught Lily to hope I was happy. Kate found another entry that made her breath catch. Lily had a nightmare about a man with kind eyes who sang her lullabies. She said he felt like home, even though she'd never met him. I think somehow she remembers Victor from when she was very small. Part of me hopes she does. Part of me hopes she doesn't. The memories came flooding back then, triggered by her mother's words. Fragment impressions from early childhood. Strong hands lifting her toward the ceiling. A deep voice singing softly in the dark. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with construction dust. She'd always assumed these were imaginary, wishful thinking from a child who wanted a father. I do remember you, Kate said quietly, turning to face Victor. Not clearly, but I remember feeling safe when you held me. I remember laughing when you made silly faces during dinner. I remember someone calling me Little Moon in a voice that made everything okay. Victor's shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. The pet name Little Moon referred to her crescent birthmark, their private joke about her being marked by celestial magic. He hadn't called anyone that in 23 years. Mark's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Foster. The lab is ready with preliminary results. We can head back to Wayne State whenever you're prepared. Kate closed Rebecca's journal and held it against her chest. These pages contained the bridge between her two identities, the connection between Kate Washington and Lily Castellano. They proved that love had motivated every choice, even the ones that seemed like betrayal. Before we get those results, Kate said, looking directly at Victor, I need you to answer one more question honestly. If that DNA test proves I'm your daughter, are you prepared to walk away from the business relationships that tore our family apart? Are you willing to choose family over empire this time? Victor met her gaze without flinching. I've already started divesting from any partnerships with questionable backgrounds. It's taken 3 years, but my business is completely legitimate now. No more mob connections, no more dirty money, no more choosing profit over principles. What about the threats we've been receiving? Kate pressed. If these people are still trying to control you through intimidation, how do I know I'm not walking into the same danger that made my mother run away? Mark answered for Victor. The Torino family was broken up by federal prosecution 5 years ago. Most of the key players are either dead or in prison. The threats Victor's been receiving appear to come from a different source entirely. What source? Kate demanded. Victor's phone buzzed with another message. This time, instead of hiding it, he turned the screen toward Kate and Mark. The text was crystal clear. Family reunion won't last long if you keep asking the wrong questions. Kate felt ice water flow through her veins. Someone was watching them right now, monitoring their movements closely enough to know they were discussing Victor's criminal past. The danger wasn't theoretical or historical. It was immediate and personal. We need to get those DNA results, Victor said grimly. And then we need to figure out who's been watching us and why they don't want this family reunion to happen. At Wayne State University Genetics Laboratory, Dr. Foster held 2 sealed envelopes in her hands when they returned to the genetics lab. The afternoon light streaming through the laboratory windows had shifted to golden amber, casting long shadows across the sterile white surfaces. Kate sat rigid in her chair, Victor beside her, both maintaining careful distance despite the electric tension between them. The results are conclusive, Dr. Foster announced, her professional tone unable to mask the significance of the moment. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Mr. Castellano, you are definitely this young woman's biological father. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. 23 years of searching, 23 years of wondering, 23 years of grief and hope and desperate longing collapsed into a single scientific certainty. Victor's hands trembled as he accepted his copy of the report. The numbers and charts confirming what his heart had known the moment he saw that crescent-shaped birthmark. Kate stared at her own envelope without opening it. The paper felt impossibly heavy in her hands, weighted with the power to transform her entire identity. She was Lily Castellano. The factory worker who worried about rent and her grandmother's medications was also the missing daughter of a billionaire construction magnate. I need air, Kate said suddenly, standing so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. I need to think. She walked out of the laboratory, leaving Victor and Mark behind. The university campus stretched around her in the fading daylight. Students hurrying between buildings with backpacks and coffee cups, lost in the normal concerns of academic life. Their ordinary problems seemed impossibly distant now. Victor followed her outside, maintaining respectful distance while staying close enough to ensure her safety. The threatening text messages had made him hyper-aware of potential dangers. Every shadow and parked car a possible threat. Lily, he said softly, using her birth name for the first time since she was 3 years old. Don't, Kate replied, not turning around. I'm not ready for that name yet. I've been Kate Washington for 23 years. I don't know how to be Lily Castellano. You don't have to be anyone but yourself, Victor said, his voice gentle but firm. The name doesn't define who you are, your character, your strength, your kindness. That's all you, regardless of what you're called. Kate finally turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Do you know what it's like to discover your entire life has been built on lies? I spent 23 years believing my father abandoned me. I carried that rejection like a stone in my chest, convinced there was something wrong with me that made me unlovable. Victor's heart shattered at her words. He took a step closer, his arms aching to comfort her, but knowing he hadn't earned that right yet. There was never anything wrong with you, Victor said, his voice breaking. You were perfect. You are perfect. Every day for the last 23 years, I've wondered if you were safe, if you were happy, if you remembered that your father loved you more than life itself. But you didn't love me more than your business? Kate countered, her pain raw and honest. Rebecca's letter made that clear. She begged you to choose family over money, and you couldn't do it. Victor accepted the accusation without defense because it was true. No, I couldn't. I was 32 years old, drunk on success, and convinced I could have everything. I thought I could protect my family while maintaining the relationships that built my fortune. I was wrong, and that mistake cost me everything that mattered. Kate studied his face, searching for signs of the man Rebecca had fallen in love with before money changed him. She found unexpected vulnerability there, genuine remorse mixed with desperate hope. Show me, she said suddenly. Show me who you really are, not the billionaire businessman or the grieving father searching for his lost daughter. Show me the man Rebecca loved before everything went wrong. Victor was quiet for a long moment, considering how to answer that request. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not the practiced corporate smile he wore in boardrooms, but something softer and more genuine. I used to sing to you, he said, his voice taking on a different quality. Every night before bed, the same Italian lullaby my grandmother sang to me when I was small. You would giggle and ask me to sing it again, even when you were too tired to keep your eyes open. The memory hit Kate with unexpected force. She could almost hear that deep voice singing softly in the darkness. Could almost feel safe hands tucking blankets around her small body. Dormi, dormi, piccola lily, Victor sang quietly, the Italian words flowing with practiced ease. Sleep, sleep, little moon. The stars are watching over you, keeping you safe through the night. Kate's breath caught. The melody was hauntingly familiar, a half-remembered soundtrack to her earliest years. She'd hummed fragments of it throughout her childhood, never knowing where the tune had come from. I remember, she whispered. Not clearly, but I remember feeling safe when you sang that song. Victor's eyes filled with tears. You called it the moon song because of your birthmark. You said the crescent on your shoulder proved you belonged to the Moon family. More memories surfaced, triggered by his words. Birthday cakes with too many candles, strong arms lifting her high in the air, the smell of sawdust and cologne that meant safety and home. The impressions were fragmentary, but unmistakably real. There's something else, Victor said, pulling out his phone. Something I've carried with me every day since you disappeared. He showed her a photo saved as his phone's wallpaper. 3-year-old Lily sat on his shoulders in the construction site that would become his first major building. She wore a tiny pink hard hat and a huge smile, her small hands gripping Victor's hair for balance. Both father and daughter looked completely happy. You insisted on visiting every job site, Victor said, his voice warm with memory. You wanted to understand how buildings grew from the ground up. You asked 1,000 questions about concrete and steel and why some walls were stronger than others. Kate stared at the photo, seeing herself in that fearless little girl who demanded to understand how the world worked. That curiosity had driven her through engineering school, through the challenges of working in male-dominated industries, through every obstacle she'd faced in building her career. You gave me that, she said, understanding flooding her voice. The need to know how things work, the refusal to accept simple answers. That came from you. And the strength to stand up to bullies like Tom Brennan came from your mother, Victor replied. Rebecca never backed down from injustice, never let anyone make her feel less than she was. You have the best of both of us. They walked slowly across campus as darkness fell, sharing fragments of recovered memories and building bridges between past and present. Victor told her about the nursery he'd preserved in his mansion, kept exactly as it was the day she disappeared. Kate described growing up in Detroit's East Side, the struggles and small victories that had shaped her into the woman she'd become. Grandmama Paula, Kate said suddenly, remembering the elderly woman waiting at home. She must have known all these years. She must have known who I really was. We need to see her, Victor agreed. She's the link between your two identities, the person who helped Rebecca keep you safe. Mark appeared beside them, his expression tense with new urgency. We have a problem. 3 black SUVs have been circling the campus for the last 20 minutes. Professional surveillance, not casual observers. Victor's protective instincts flared immediately. How do you know they're watching us? Because they've maintained visual contact while staying far enough away to avoid detection by amateur eyes. These are professionals, Victor, and they're not interested in campus security. Kate felt fear spike through her newfound happiness. The fairy tale reunion was colliding with harsh reality. Someone didn't want the Castellano family to reconnect, and they were willing to use intimidation to prevent it. My car is in the faculty parking lot, Mark said, pulling out his keys. We can reach it without exposing ourselves in open spaces. As they hurried across campus, Victor's phone buzzed with another threatening message. This one was different, more specific, and significantly more terrifying. Lily Castellano died 23 years ago. Keep her buried or you'll both join Rebecca. Victor showed the message to Mark, who immediately called someone on his encrypted phone. This is Webb. I need immediate backup at Wayne State University faculty parking lot. 3 hostiles in black vehicles. Potential kidnapping situation. Who are you calling? Kate asked, panic rising in her chest. Private security firm, Mark replied grimly. Ex-military personnel who specialize in protecting people from exactly this type of threat. They reached Mark's SUV without incident, but Victor noticed the 3 black vehicles repositioning themselves to block potential exit routes. These weren't random criminals or opportunistic kidnappers. This was a coordinated operation by people who understood surveillance and tactical positioning. Drive! Victor ordered as they climbed into the SUV. Get us to Paula's house. If someone's targeting Lily, they might go after the woman who raised her. Mark gunned the engine, taking an audacious route through Detroit's side streets to avoid the surveillance vehicles. But Victor's phone continued buzzing with increasingly specific threats. Someone knew exactly where they were going and what they planned to do. They're not just watching us, Victor realized, reading the latest message. They have access to our communications, our plans, maybe even our location data. Then we turn off all electronic devices, Mark said, pulling his SUV into an alley behind a closed restaurant. Right now, everything off, batteries out if possible. They powered down their phones and removed the batteries. The sudden digital silence felt both liberating and terrifying. Without GPS or communication devices, they were cut off from help, but also invisible to electronic surveillance. There's something you need to understand, Victor said to Kate as Mark resumed driving through darkened streets. The people sending these threats aren't connected to my old business partnerships. The Torino family is history. This is something new. Someone who has their own reasons for wanting our family to stay separated. What kind of reasons? Kate asked, though she suspected the answer would be complicated and dangerous. I don't know yet, Victor admitted, but I intend to find out because Lily, you are my daughter, and I've already lost you once. I won't let anyone take you away from me again. Kate felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. For the first time since learning the truth, she allowed herself to feel what it meant to have a father who would fight for her, protect her, choose her over his own safety. Victor, she said, using his first name deliberately. When this is over, when we figure out who's threatening us and why, I want to try. I want to learn how to be your daughter. Victor's eyes filled with tears as he reached over and squeezed her hand. I want to learn how to be your father. The father I should have been 23 years ago. As Mark's SUV wound through Detroit's evening traffic toward the East Side apartment where Paula Washington waited, neither Victor nor Kate noticed the single black motorcycle following them at a discreet distance. Its rider wore no helmet, revealing a face that Victor would have recognized if he'd seen it. Someone from his past had returned with a very specific agenda, and the Castellano family reunion was about to become much more dangerous than anyone anticipated. The motorcycle had followed them through 12 turns and 3 deliberate route changes. Mark confirmed it in his rearview mirror as they pulled into the parking lot of Paula's apartment complex. The rider remained at a distance, but maintained visual contact. Professional surveillance that made Victor's skin crawl with familiar dread. "We can't lead this threat to Paula," Victor said as they sat in the darkened SUV. "If someone's targeting our family, an elderly woman becomes a liability." "She's not just any elderly woman," Kate replied, studying the modest three-story building where she'd lived for the past decade. "Grandmama Paula raised me. She's family. Victor. Real family, not just DNA connections." The words stung because they were true. Paula Washington had been present for every milestone Victor had missed, every scraped knee he hadn't kissed, every bedtime story he hadn't read. She'd earned the title family through daily sacrifice and unconditional love. Mark checked his watch. "My security team should be in position within 10 minutes. We wait for backup before approaching the building." But as they watched Paula's third-floor window, the lights went out. Not gradually, as if someone were going to bed, but suddenly and completely. The apartment that had glowed with warm lamplight moments before went dark as a tomb. "Something's wrong," Kate said, her voice tight with fear. "Grandmama never turns off all the lights at once. She's afraid of falling in the dark." Victor's phone, despite having its battery removed, somehow managed to buzz with an incoming message. The impossible notification made all three of them freeze with terror. Mark grabbed the device and saw the screen displaying a text from an unknown number. "Paula Washington sends her regards. Come inside alone or she won't send anything else." "How is this possible?" Mark demanded, staring at the phone that should have been completely dead. "We removed the battery 20 minutes ago." Victor's blood turned to ice as he realized the implications. "They've been tracking us through more than just our phones. They have someone inside my organization, someone with access to our communication systems and movement patterns." Kate was already opening the SUV door. "I don't care how they're doing it. If Paula's in danger because of me, because of us finding each other, then I have to help her." "Wait," Victor said, grabbing her arm. "This is obviously a trap. They're using Paula to force us into a vulnerable position. Then we spring the trap," Kate replied, with the same stubborn determination that had driven Rebecca to protect her daughter at any cost. "But we do it smart. Mark, can your security team get into the building through the back entrance?" Mark was already on his radio coordinating with the backup team that had been shadowing them since Wayne State. "Affirmative. They'll secure the rear exit and establish overwatch positions. But this feels like more than a simple kidnapping. The level of electronic surveillance, the knowledge of our movements, this requires significant resources." Victor studied the darkened building, counting windows and calculating approach angles with a tactical mindset he developed during his years dealing with dangerous business partners. Someone had invested serious time and money into monitoring his family reunion. This wasn't opportunistic crime or random violence. "There," Kate said, pointing to a figure silhouetted against Paula's window. "Someone's in the apartment." The silhouette gestured toward the parking lot, clearly aware they were being observed. Then Paula appeared at the window, her elderly frame unmistakable, even in the darkness. She pressed her hand against the glass in what could have been a greeting or a desperate plea for help. Victor's phone buzzed again with another impossible message. "Victor Castellano made many enemies over the years. Some of them have very long memories and very patient plans. Come upstairs now, or Paula Washington will pay for your sins." This isn't about preventing our reunion, Victor realized. Pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. This is about revenge. Someone from my past. Someone who's been waiting for the right opportunity to hurt me in the most personal way possible. Mark's radio crackled with updates from the security team. "Building secured. No obvious escape routes compromised. But boss, we've got another problem. There are at least 4 additional hostiles positioned around the perimeter. This is a coordinated operation, not a lone wolf scenario." Kate studied Victor's face, seeing a hardness there she hadn't noticed before. This was the man who'd built an empire through dangerous partnerships, who'd survived in a world where violence was a business tool. The gentle father who'd sung Italian lullabies was still there. But survival instincts honed by decades of risk were taking precedence. "You know who's doing this?" Kate said, reading the recognition in his expression. "This isn't random. You know exactly who we're dealing with." Victor nodded grimly. Antonio Torino, Salvatore Torino's younger brother? I thought he was dead. The mob family you used to work with? Mark asked, his voice sharp with new understanding. I thought federal prosecution destroyed their organization 5 years ago. It did, Victor confirmed. Salvatore died in prison. Most of the key lieutenants were killed or incarcerated, but Antonio was always the smart one, the careful one. If he survived, if he's been planning revenge all these years. Victor's phone displayed another message that confirmed his worst fears. You destroyed my family, Victor. You testified against my brother, put him in prison to die. Now I return the favor. Your daughter gets to watch you lose everything you love, just like I did. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Victor's transition to legitimate business hadn't been entirely voluntary. When federal investigators closed in on the Torino organization, Victor had cooperated with prosecutors to protect his own assets and avoid prison time. His testimony had been instrumental in convicting Salvatore Torino and dismantling the crime family's operations. You were a federal witness, Kate said, understanding, flooding her voice. That's why Rebecca really ran away. Not just because you were involved with criminals, but because you betrayed them. She knew they'd come for revenge eventually. Victor's face crumpled with shame and regret. I thought cooperation was the only way to protect our family. I gave the FBI everything they needed to prosecute the entire organization, but I never knew about Antonio. Never realized Salvatore had a brother who escaped the federal sweep. Mark checked his equipment, preparing for what was clearly going to be a violent confrontation. How do we handle this? Antonio has Paula. He has tactical advantages, and he's had years to plan this revenge. We give him what he wants, Victor said quietly. Me. I go upstairs alone, face whatever consequences my choices deserve. But first, Kate gets clear of this situation. This is my past, my mistakes. She doesn't pay for crimes committed before she was even born. Absolutely not, Kate replied with fierce determination. I just found my father. I'm not losing him to some mob vendetta from 20 years ago. Victor's phone buzzed with a new message that made his heart stop. Bring Lily upstairs or Paula dies in the next 60 seconds. No security teams, no backup, no weapons, just father and daughter together at last. The ultimatum was clear and brutal. Antonio Torino wanted both Castellanos in one place, vulnerable and isolated. Whatever revenge he planned required Victor to watch his daughter suffer, to experience the same helplessness Antonio had felt watching his family destroyed by federal prosecution. There has to be another way, Mark said desperately. We have professional security, tactical advantages, superior numbers. We don't have to walk into an obvious trap. But Victor was already checking the loads in a concealed pistol he'd carried for 20 years. Antonio's not interested in money or negotiations. This is personal. He wants me to feel what it's like to lose family, to watch the people you love die because of choices you made. Kate saw the gun and felt her blood freeze. You're planning to kill him. I'm planning to protect you and Paula, Victor corrected. Whatever it takes. And if you die in the process, Kate demanded. If this revenge plan includes making sure you don't survive the encounter, then what happens to the family we're trying to rebuild? Victor met her eyes with painful honesty. Then you live. You take Paula somewhere safe, change your identity again if necessary, and you live the life Rebecca wanted for you, free from the consequences of my mistakes. The apartment building's front door opened, and a figure emerged onto the fire escape. Even in the darkness, Victor could make out Antonio Torino's distinctive profile. Older now, grayer, but unmistakably the same man who'd sworn revenge in a federal courthouse 5 years ago. Antonio held something to his mouth, speaking into what was probably a voice amplifier. His words echoed across the parking lot with crystal clarity. Victor Castellano, you have 30 seconds to come upstairs with your daughter, or I start removing Paula Washington's fingers one at a time. To prove his sincerity, Antonio held up a pair of pruning shears that glinted in the streetlight. The threat was specific, brutal, and completely credible. We go, Kate said, making the decision for both of them. We go upstairs, we face this together, and we find a way to protect Paula without getting ourselves killed. Victor wanted to argue, to find some alternative that didn't involve putting his newly discovered daughter in mortal danger. But time was running out, and Antonio Torino had proven his willingness to hurt innocent people to achieve his revenge. "Mark," Victor said, handing over his business card and car keys. "If we don't come back down in 1 hour, make sure Kate's college loans are paid off and Paula's medical expenses are covered. Make sure people know they were good people who didn't deserve this." As Victor and Kate walked toward the apartment building, neither of them noticed the small explosive device Antonio's men had attached to Mark's SUV. The security team's backup vehicles had been similarly rigged. Whatever happened in Paula's apartment, Antonio Torino had no intention of leaving witnesses to his revenge. The motorcycle rider who'd been following them removed his helmet, revealing a face scarred by years of prison violence. Tom Brennan, the racist foreman Victor had fired that morning, smiled with malicious satisfaction. Antonio Torino had found the perfect inside source, someone with intimate knowledge of Victor's routine and personal vendettas. 15 seconds. Antonio's voice echoed from the fire escape. Then the old woman starts screaming. Victor took Kate's hand as they approached the building entrance. "Whatever happens up there, remember that finding you again was worth any price I have to pay." Kate squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from the connection she'd never expected to feel. "Whatever happens, we face it as family, the way we should have faced everything for the last 23 years. They entered the building together, father and daughter, walking into a trap that had been 23 years in the making. Behind them, Mark desperately coordinated with his security team, trying to find some way to save the people he'd sworn to protect. But Antonio Torino had spent 5 years planning this revenge, and he'd accounted for every variable except one. He'd underestimated the bond between a father who'd lost everything and a daughter who'd finally found where she belonged. In Paula Washington's apartment building, the stairwell reeked of decades of cooking smells and cigarette smoke. Each step echoed in the narrow space as Victor and Kate climbed toward the confrontation that would determine whether their family survived its first day together. Victor's hand rested on the concealed pistol beneath his jacket, but he knew Antonio would have anticipated weapons. This wasn't about firepower. This was about psychology, about making Victor experience the same helplessness Antonio had felt watching his family destroyed. "Doors open," Kate whispered as they reached the third-floor landing. Paula's apartment door stood ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway from the living room beyond. No sounds came from inside, which was somehow more terrifying than screams would have been. Victor pushed the door open slowly, keeping Kate behind him. The familiar apartment looked exactly as it had during his brief visit years ago when he'd hired Mark to investigate every possible connection to Rebecca and Lily. Paula's collection of family photos covered one wall, chronicling Kate's growth from childhood through college graduation. Victor's heart clenched seeing the milestones he'd missed, the proud moments he should have shared. "Come all the way in." Antonio Torino's voice called from the kitchen. "Close the door behind you. We don't want to disturb the neighbors with what comes next." They entered the living room to find Paula Washington sitting in her favorite armchair, her hands zip-tied to the armrests, but otherwise appearing unharmed. Her eyes were alert and angry rather than fearful, the same stubborn strength that had helped her raise Kate through poverty and hardship. Antonio stepped out of the kitchen, and Victor was shocked by how much 5 years in hiding had changed him. The man who'd once been Salvatore's charming younger brother now carried visible scars from whatever violence had marked his years underground. His left hand was partially missing 2 fingers, and burn scars climbed his neck like twisted rope. "Victor Castellano," Antonio said, his voice carrying the weight of 5 years' worth of accumulated hatred. "You look prosperous. Success suits you. Must be nice, building your empire on my family's graves." "Let Paula go," Victor said, keeping his voice steady. "Your problem is with me, not with innocent people." "Innocent?" Antonio laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "You think anyone connected to your family is innocent? You destroyed my brother, sent him to die in federal prison, scattered my cousins to the wind. Now you get to watch your family crumble the same way." Kate stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Torino, I understand you're angry about your brother, but I was 3 years old when whatever happened between you and Victor took place. Paula raised me after my mother died. We're not your enemies." Antonio's scarred face twisted with something that might have been sympathy before hardening back into hatred. "Your father made you my enemy the day he chose to save his own skin by destroying mine. But don't worry, little Lily. You'll get to live long enough to understand exactly what he cost us all." Victor's hand moved toward his concealed weapon, but Antonio was ready for that. 3 men stepped out of Paula's bedroom and bathroom, all armed, all positioned to have clear shots at both Victor and Kate. The apartment had become a tactical nightmare, too small for maneuvering, too many hostiles for direct confrontation. "Tom Brennan sends his regards," Antonio continued conversationally. "Interesting man. Spent the day telling me all about your touching reunion at the factory, how you fired him for mistreating your precious daughter, how you destroyed his career to protect a girl you just met." The betrayal hit Victor like a physical blow. Tom's racism and resentment had made him the perfect inside source for Antonio's revenge. Every detail of their day, every movement, every emotional moment had been reported back to their enemies. "You see, Victor," Antonio said, pulling out a chair and sitting down as if they were having a friendly conversation. "I've had 5 years to plan this. 5 years to think about how to hurt you the way you hurt me. Killing you would be too quick, too merciful. But making you watch your daughter die because of your choices, making you live with the knowledge that Lily paid for your sins, that's the kind of pain that lasts forever." Paula spoke for the first time since they'd entered, her voice steady despite her restraints. "Antonio Torino, you're making a mistake. This child has nothing to do with whatever happened between you men 20 years ago." "Mrs. Washington," Antonio replied with mock politeness, "you helped Rebecca steal this child from her father. You helped build the lie that kept them separated. You're as guilty as anyone in this room." Kate's mind raced, calculating options and outcomes. The apartment was too small for Victor's security team to mount an effective rescue without risking civilian casualties. Antonio had positioned his men to prevent escape through the windows or back toward the door. But something about the setup bothered her, some tactical flaw she couldn't quite identify. "What exactly do you want?" Victor asked, buying time while assessing their situation. "If this is about money, about compensation for what happened to your family, we can negotiate." "Money?" Antonio's laugh was genuinely amused. "Victor, you still don't understand. This isn't about profit. This is about justice. You testified against my brother to save yourself from federal prison. When you gave the FBI everything they needed to destroy our organization. Salvatore died in protective custody because other inmates wanted him dead. My cousin scattered to other cities, other lives, broken and afraid." Victor accepted the accusation because it was true. When federal investigators had offered him immunity in exchange for testimony against the Torino organization, he'd taken the deal to protect his legitimate business interests and avoid prosecution. He told himself it was the right choice, the smart choice, the only way to secure his family's future. "I was trying to get out," Victor said quietly. "I wanted to go legitimate, to build something clean for Rebecca and Lily. Cooperating with the FBI was the only way to break free from your brother's control." "By destroying everyone else who couldn't make the same deal," Antonio replied. "By saving yourself and damning the rest of us." Kate studied the tactical situation more carefully, noting details that Victor's emotional turmoil was causing him to miss. Antonio's men were positioned defensively, focused on preventing escape rather than optimizing their fields of fire. The apartment's layout gave them visual control but limited their mobility. And most importantly, Antonio was talking too much, revealing too many details about his plan. "You're stalling," Kate realized suddenly. "This whole conversation, the dramatic setup, positioning us all in one room, you're waiting for something." Antonio's scarred face split into a genuinely pleased smile. "Smart girl, you definitely inherited Victor's tactical mind." "Yes, I'm waiting. In about 10 minutes, Mark Webb and his security team are going to discover that their vehicles have been rigged with explosives. Remote detonation triggered by cell phone signal." Victor's blood turned to ice. Mark and his men were sitting in a parking lot full of bombs, waiting to provide backup that would never come. "But that's not the best part," Antonio continued, clearly enjoying Victor's growing despair. The best part is that those explosions will trigger a federal investigation into the Castellano family's business practices. Anonymous tips have already been sent to the FBI suggesting your construction empire is still connected to organized crime. By tomorrow morning, your assets will be frozen, your employees questioned, your reputation destroyed. The full scope of Antonio's revenge became clear. He wasn't just planning to kill Victor and Kate. He was planning to destroy everything Victor had built, to reduce his empire to ashes, and leave his name associated forever with criminal activity. Even if we don't survive this encounter, Antonio said, the investigation will continue. Your company's clients will abandon contracts. Your investors will flee. Your employees will be unemployed. Everything you built on my family's bones will crumble to dust. Victor realized that Antonio had learned from his brother's mistakes. Salvatore had relied on violence and intimidation. Antonio was using the same legal system that had destroyed the Torino family to destroy Victor's empire. There's just one way this ends differently, Antonio said, producing a legal document from his jacket. You sign over 51% of Castellano Industries to a shell corporation I control. You become a minority partner in your own company, dependent on my goodwill for your continued prosperity. Victor stared at the contract, understanding the choice Antonio was offering. Financial servitude in exchange for their lives, a return to the kind of partnership that had originally corrupted his business, but with their roles reversed. And if I refuse? Victor asked, though he already knew the answer. Then Lily dies first, so you can experience the same loss I felt when your testimony killed my brother. Then Paula dies, so you understand what it means to destroy innocent people. Then you die, knowing that everything you built will be investigated and destroyed anyway. The apartment fell silent, except for the ticking of Paula's old mantel clock. Outside, car engines started in the parking lot as Mark's security team prepared for an assault that would trigger the explosive devices attached to their vehicles. Victor looked at his daughter, seeing Rebecca's determination mixed with his own tactical intelligence. She met his eyes and gave an almost imperceptible nod, communicating without words the way family members do in crisis situations. I need a pen, Victor said, reaching for the contract. Antonio smiled with savage satisfaction, producing a gold fountain pen from his jacket. Smart choice, Victor. You always were better at calculations than honor. But as Victor reached for the pen, Kate made her choice. She'd spent her entire life believing her father had abandoned her family. Now she understood he'd made difficult choices, trying to protect them from exactly this kind of situation. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Antonio, Kate said, her voice carrying Paula's strength and Rebecca's courage. You made one mistake in your perfect revenge plan. What's that, little Lily? You assumed my father would choose his empire over his family again, but he already lost us once because of that choice. He won't make the same mistake twice. Victor smiled, understanding flooding his face as he grasped what Kate was telling him. The contract, the threats, the elaborate revenge scheme, all depended on Antonio believing that Victor valued his business more than his relationships. She's right, Victor said, putting the contract down and signing. 23 years ago, I chose money over family and lost everything that mattered. I won't make that choice again. Antonio's confidence wavered as he realized his psychological leverage was crumbling. You're bluffing. No one walks away from a billion-dollar empire. Watch me, Victor said, pulling out his concealed pistol in one fluid motion. The next 60 seconds would determine whether the Castellano family's reunion lasted longer than their first day together. The ultimate choice is here. Family over empire, love over money, the chance to get it right this time. Paula's apartment erupted into chaos as Victor's pistol cleared his jacket. Antonio's men reacted with professional speed, but the confined space worked against them. In the narrow living room, their positioning that had seemed tactically sound became a liability. They couldn't fire without risking hitting each other or their boss. Kate moved at the same instant as her father, not toward cover, but toward Paula's chair. She'd spent years working construction sites where split-second decisions meant the difference between safety and disaster. While Victor engaged Antonio's attention, she used a ceramic lamp base to shatter the zip ties holding Paula's wrists. Kitchen window. Paula whispered urgently as Kate freed her hands. Fire escape leads to the alley behind the building. But before they could move toward escape, Victor's voice cut through the confusion. Nobody moves. Antonio, tell your men to lower their weapons, or I put a bullet in your chest right now. The standoff was delicate and deadly. Victor had his pistol trained on Antonio's center mass, but three armed men had clear shots at him from different angles. One wrong move from anyone would turn Paula's living room into a slaughterhouse. You're bluffing, Antonio said, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. You won't risk your daughter's life for some misguided heroics. Try me, Victor replied, his voice carrying the cold certainty of a man who'd already lost everything once. 23 years ago, I chose wrong. I chose money over family, empire over love. I won't make that mistake again. Outside, the sound of car engines revving suggested Mark's security team was preparing to move. Victor's heart hammered with the knowledge that those vehicles were rigged with explosives, that good men were about to die because they tried to help him reconnect with his daughter. Kate, Victor said without taking his eyes off Antonio. Take Paula and get out of here. Use the fire escape. Get to the street, find Mark, and tell him to evacuate the parking lot immediately. I'm not leaving you, Kate replied with fierce determination. We found each other again. I won't lose you to some 20-year-old vendetta. Paula Washington, despite being 78 years old and recently tied to a chair, proved she still had surprises left. She grabbed the heavy cast iron skillet from her kitchen counter and swung it with surprising force into the knee of the nearest armed man. The impact sent him crashing into Paula's dining table, his weapons skittering across the floor. The momentary distraction was all Victor needed. He shifted his aim and put a bullet through the shoulder of the second gunman, spinning him around and sending his pistol flying. But the third managed to get a shot off, the bullet splintering the wooden doorframe inches from Kate's head. Antonio used the chaos to dive behind Paula's couch, shouting orders to his remaining men. Kill them all. Burn this whole building down if you have to. Victor realized with crystal clarity that conventional tactics wouldn't work in this situation. Too many innocent people were at risk. Too many variables beyond his control. But there was one choice he could make. One sacrifice that might save the people he loved. Antonio, Victor called out, his voice carrying across the apartment. You want revenge? You want me to pay for destroying your family? Fine. Let's make a deal. No deals, Antonio shouted back. No negotiations, just blood and fire until everyone pays. But Victor was already moving, grabbing the unsigned contract from Paula's coffee table. In one fluid motion, he signed his name across the bottom and held the document above his head. 51% of Castellano Industries, Victor announced. Everything you wanted. The contract is signed, witnessed, and legally binding. The apartment fell silent, except for the groans of wounded men and Paula's labored breathing. Antonio's scarred face appeared above the couch back, his eyes fixed on the signed contract with hungry fascination. You're lying, Antonio said, but hope crept into his voice. Some desperate trick to buy time. No tricks, Victor replied, placing the contract on Paula's coffee table where everyone could see it. You win, Antonio. You get everything you wanted, control of my company. Revenge for your brother's death. The satisfaction of watching me lose my empire. Kate stared at her father with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. In the span of 24 hours, he discovered his missing daughter and then given up his life's work to protect her. The man who'd once chosen money over family had just chosen family over everything else. But there's one condition, Victor continued. His pistol still trained on Antonio's position. My daughter and Paula walk out of here safely. No pursuit, no retaliation, no further threats. You have what you came for. Antonio stood slowly, his own weapon lowered but ready. And you? What happens to Victor Castellano after he signs away his empire? I disappear, Victor said simply. New identity, new life, far away from Detroit and everything I built here. You'll never see me again, and I'll never interfere with your operation of Castellano Industries. The offer hung in the air like smoke from gunpowder. Antonio had achieved everything he dreamed of during 5 years of planning revenge. Financial control, public humiliation, and the satisfaction of watching his enemy lose everything that mattered. Deal, Antonio said, finally holstering his weapon. But if you ever come back, If you ever try to reclaim what you've lost, I'll hunt you down and finish what we started here tonight. Victor nodded, understanding the terms completely. He was trading his empire for his daughter's safety, his fortune for her freedom. It was the choice Rebecca had begged him to make 23 years ago, and he was finally wise enough to make it. But Kate had other plans. No, she said firmly, her voice carrying the authority she'd learned managing difficult situations at the steel factory. That's not how this ends. Both Victor and Antonio stared at her in surprise. She picked up the signed contract and, before anyone could stop her, tore it in half. Kate, what are you doing? Victor demanded. That contract is your protection. That contract is a lie, Kate replied, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Antonio, you think you've won because my father signed away his company, but you're forgetting something important. What's that? Antonio asked, his hand moving back toward his weapon. Kate smiled with the same confidence that had helped her face down racist supervisors and impossible odds throughout her career. I'm a trained engineer with a degree in metallurgy and construction management. I know how buildings are put together, how they're designed to withstand stress and pressure, and most importantly, I know how they fail. She pointed toward Paula's kitchen window, where the sound of sirens was growing louder. Those explosives you attached to Mark's vehicles, they are positioned wrong. Too close to the building's natural gas lines, not far enough from the electrical transformers that power this entire block. Antonio's confidence wavered as he realized what she was implying. If those bombs go off, Kate continued, they won't just kill Mark and his security team. They'll rupture the gas mains and cause a chain reaction that brings down every building in a 4-block radius, including whatever hideout you're using as your base of operations. The color drained from Antonio's scarred face as he understood the implications. His revenge plan would destroy not only his enemies, but also innocent families, children, elderly people who had nothing to do with his vendetta against Victor. You're bluffing, Antonio said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Kate asked, pulling out her phone and showing him the city utilities map she'd accessed during their conversation. Natural gas pressure readings, electrical grid schematics, building foundation reports. I know exactly what will happen when your bombs detonate. Paula Washington spoke for the first time since the standoff began, her voice carrying the moral authority of someone who'd spent 78 years watching good and evil play out in the world. Antonio Torino, Paula said, your brother died in prison because he chose violence over wisdom. Your family was destroyed because they chose crime over honest work. Don't compound their mistakes by murdering innocent people who never hurt anyone. The old woman's words hit Antonio harder than any threat or weapon could have. She was right, and he knew it. His quest for revenge had twisted him into the same kind of monster that had destroyed his family in the first place. Outside, Mark's voice carried through a bullhorn as he coordinated the evacuation of the parking lot. The explosives had been discovered by his bomb detection equipment, and emergency services were clearing the area. It's over, Antonio, Victor said quietly. Your revenge, my empire, all of it. The only choice left is whether we walk away from this as better people, or whether we let the past destroy what's left of our futures. Antonio looked around Paula's apartment, seeing the family photos that chronicled a life built on love rather than money. The simple furniture that represented happiness earned through hard work and sacrifice. This was what Victor had chosen over his billion-dollar empire, the chance to be part of a real family. Keep your company, Antonio said finally, his weapon clattering to the floor. Keep your money, your buildings, your success. I'm tired of carrying my brother's hatred. It's poisoned everything I've touched for 5 years. Victor lowered his own pistol, hardly believing the confrontation was ending without bloodshed. What will you do now? Disappear? Antonio replied. Find some quiet place where the Torino name doesn't mean anything. Where I can try to remember who I was before revenge became my only purpose. 6 months later, Victor walked his daughter down the aisle at her wedding to Derek Martinez, a fellow engineer she'd met through the scholarship program Castellano Industries had established for underprivileged students. The ceremony took place in the garden behind Paula Washington's new house, a modest but comfortable home Victor had purchased for the woman who'd raised his daughter with such love and strength. Kate wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit perfectly, and carried a bouquet that included pressed flowers from Rebecca's journal. As Victor placed her hand in Derek's, he whispered the same words he'd spoken to 3-year-old Lily 23 years earlier. Remember, little moon, you're marked for great things. The reception featured an Italian band that played traditional songs, including the lullaby Victor had sung to Lily during those precious early years. Paula Washington danced with Mark Webb, who'd become a frequent visitor since helping to rebuild their shattered family. Even Tom Brennan was there, sober for 6 months and working as a volunteer at the community center Kate had established in Rebecca's memory. Antonio Torino sent a wedding gift from somewhere in Montana, where he was reportedly working as a ranch hand under a new name. The gift was simple, a handmade wooden picture frame containing a note that read, "Some families are worth fighting for. Others are worth forgiving. Congratulations on building the right kind." As Victor watched his daughter dance with her new husband, he thought about the choices that had shaped their lives. The wrong choices that had separated them for 23 years, and the right choices that had brought them back together. He learned that love wasn't something you could buy or build or steal. It was something you had to choose every day over every other temptation. Kate caught his eye across the dance floor and smiled. The same radiant expression she'd worn as a 3-year-old when he'd sung her to sleep. Some bonds, Victor realized, were stronger than time, deeper than money, and more precious than any empire he could ever build. The family was finally whole. And this time, nothing would tear them apart. 2 years later, the brass plaque outside the Detroit Community Center gleamed in the winter sunlight. The Rebecca Martinez Castellano Memorial Center for Family Reunification. Inside, Kate Castellano Martinez reviewed applications from families separated by circumstances beyond their control. The foundation she'd established had helped reunite over 300 families in 2 years using the same private investigation network that had once searched for her. Victor entered her office carrying 2 cups of coffee and the morning newspaper. At 57, he looked younger than he had during his empire-building years. The stress lines around his eyes had softened, replaced by the kind of peace that came from making the right choices. The Detroit Free Press wants to do a follow-up story, Victor said, placing the newspaper on Kate's desk. 2 years after the billionaire discovers missing daughter headlines, they want to know how we're doing. Kate smiled, her hand moving unconsciously to touch the small gold pendant she wore, a replica of her crescent birthmark that Victor had commissioned for her wedding. What did you tell them? That some stories don't need sequels. They need action. The construction company had undergone radical changes under Victor's renewed leadership. Every major project now included provisions for hiring workers from disadvantaged communities with mandatory sensitivity training for all supervisors. The Tom Brennan incident had become a case study in corporate responsibility taught in business schools across the country. Mark Webb had transitioned from private investigator to chief security officer, overseeing not just Victor's personal protection, but the safety protocols that protected every Castellano Industries employee. The company's worker fatality rate had dropped to 0 over 2 years, making it the safest construction operation in the Midwest. Any word from Montana? Kate asked, referring to Antonio Torino's self-imposed exile. He sent Christmas cards, Victor replied, showing her a simple greeting card postmarked from a small town near Glacier National Park. He's working as a wilderness guide now. Says he's teaching city kids how to find their way in the mountains. Every Sunday, 3 generations of the Castellano family gathered at Paula's house for dinner. Paula, now 80 years old, had become the unofficial matriarch of a family that included not just Victor and Kate, but Derek Martinez, Mark Webb, and even Tom Brennan, who'd maintained his sobriety and worked as a counselor at the community center. Paula's back garden had been transformed into a memorial space for Rebecca with flowers from every season and a small fountain that played the Italian lullaby Victor had sung to Lily 23 years earlier. Kate often found her father sitting there in the evenings talking quietly to Rebecca's memory about their daughter's achievements. "She would be so proud," Victor would say, and Paula would nod, knowing that Rebecca's sacrifice had ultimately led to something beautiful. On a quiet evening, as snow fell outside Paula's kitchen window, Victor and Kate sat together reviewing thank you letters from families the foundation had helped reunite. Some had been separated by immigration policies, others by poverty, addiction, or domestic violence. Each reunion reminded them that love really could transcend any barrier if people were willing to fight for it. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Tom Brennan hadn't been such a racist? Kate asked, reading a letter from a father in California who'd found his son after 15 years of searching. Every day, Victor replied. But then I realized that's the wrong question. The right question is, what are we going to do with the time we have now? Kate folded the letters carefully and placed them in the growing file of success stories. We're going to help other families find each other. We're going to make sure no child grows up thinking they were abandoned when they were actually protected. And we're going to keep choosing love over everything else. Every single day, Victor reached over and squeezed his daughter's hand, the same gesture he'd made countless times during her childhood and would continue making for the rest of their lives together. Outside, Detroit glittered with holiday lights and the promise of renewal that came with every season. Inside Paula's house, a family that had been broken by fear and pride and impossible choices was stronger than ever, bound together by the radical decision to forgive the past and build something better for the future. Some stories end with explosions and dramatic confrontations. The best ones end with ordinary moments made extraordinary by love. This is what redemption looks like. Not a single moment of dramatic change, but thousands of small choices to choose family over everything else. This story is a reminder that it's never too late to make the right decision. Never too late to choose what really matters. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So, don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret.